to this new episode of the FOREVERNESS podcast. We are David Giraldo, the man behind the camera, Pedro Juan, and myself, Pablo, and we are very excited to come with us today with Dr. Enrique Samper. Enrique Samper is a very prestigious scientist in the field of telomere studies. His CV is very prolific, so I'm gonna just mention a few bullet points. He studied biology in Michigan State University, and then he did a master's in biotechnology in University of London, PhD cum laude in Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, postdoctoral fellow in the Bach Institute for Aging Research, postdoctoral fellow in the National Center for Biotechnology in Madrid, scientist in the National Center for Cardiovascular Research in Spain, which is one of the most advanced research centers of the world in the field. And his publications has been cited more than 11,000 times, more than 1,000 times in the last 5 years. Later on, he co-founded the company Nin Genetics, a very innovative company in the field of the design and developing genetic diagnosis products and services. And that company was acquired, and later on he's leading the company LifeLength, which is a world leader in studying the telomere length and diagnosis related to telomeres. As a disclaimer, we would like to say that this interview and his opinions are purely personal and don't represent the company stance on any of these topics. With this being said, thank you very much, Enrique, for making time. We know you are super busy, and it's such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Pablo. The honor is all mine. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thanks, Abilio. I'm gonna start with a very open question. This is just a conversation. What caught your attention first when you first decided to study this particular field? Was it aging, or was it the telomeres themselves?
So in the very beginning, I was actually a technician in a company in Canada, and I was there working for a molecular biologist called José Luis de la Pompa. And I wanted to come back to Spain after many years abroad. And I asked, who is leading the field, and he said, well, there's a very special person called Maria Blasco who's returning to Spain, and she works on telomeres and telomerase, which are in between the oncology field and the aging field. Okay, this is something so fundamental for cells that it's implicated in many diseases, in many aspects of basic biology. So I went to the National Center for Biotechnology to do my PhD thesis in her laboratory. And it was that was a pleasure and an honor, and we worked really well. We were extremely productive, and ever since then, I've been related to or involved in research and in development and in the field of genetic diagnosis since 1997 till today.
That's awesome. But my question is more like the first spark. Like, you were studying biology, and then you were naturally, or you were since the beginning interested in aging and how to work with this, or just out of, I don't know, maybe sometimes it happens to us that it's a coincidence and we are working in something in particular and we discover.
Well, what happened was I was there in Canada, right, in Toronto, studying the molecular biology of embryonic development. Prior to that, I had done a master's degree at the University of London studying senescence, which is what happens when cells become old, okay, in another organism, actually in a plant. Okay, so I think that either happened by chance or it happened by destiny. I cannot tell you which one of the two. Okay. So what happened was, I was already inclined in aging and understanding how the biology of aging works from the very early sort of career stages, no? Before I started my PhD thesis. So I think I was already primed. I was already inclined to study that field. Okay. And then one thing leads to another. You know how life goes. It's not linear. Opportunities happen. You decide, or you take decisions, and they lead you in a particular path.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think
Um,
it's very relevant, Pablo, is excuse me, because you are reminded because of the dates of your study. I'm gonna quote you the first line of the novel Foreverness because I think you will be able to relate to this. The novel starts with when in 1992 Dr. Joao Koch Watanabe finished his PhD in physiology, he never thought he one day would be immortal. Because I see you same day, it's sort of like that's the possibility that suddenly it opens in front of us, and I mean it's not really. Please, Pablo, go with this, but I thought it's interesting because we are talking about the same time lapse where real scientists like yourself have been diving deep into that field. Anyway, sorry for the interruption.
No, no, no. It's very relevant. So actually, the field of geroscience, or the science of aging, um, I think it started around the 50s. I think it was 1953 when a scientist put out this theory of the oxidative stress theory of aging. Okay. So during those decades, the field of cancer research, which is, of course, related to aging and how the cells become immortal, because cancer cells are immortal, because they can divide so many times, and they can divide so many times actually because they turn on this enzyme called telomerase that allows them to divide forever. Okay. So from the 1950s, there's been a lot of intense research, but this is absolutely accelerating at an incredible pace today. So when I started my PhD in 1997, it was kind of out there. No, aging research was there was interest, but it was a little bit esoteric, if I may say so. Okay, it was a little bit strange that biologists wanted to do, because aging is not considered a disease, although it is the mother of all aging related diseases. So it was a little bit of a specific topic. When I went to the Back Institute for Aging Research in Novato, California, that institute had been built 5 years earlier. So basically, when I started my PhD thesis, and it's a beautiful story. Allow me to comment on it for a second. No? So there was a medical doctor at University of California, San Francisco, and his wife, Dr. and Mrs. Buck, who actually were already wealthy, but they bought a land, a piece of state in Texas, and they found oil, petroleum oil. So they became billionaires in today's dollars. Okay, and they decided they didn't have children. They didn't have children, so they decided to donate all that to create three projects. The largest of which is a specific institute for the study of aging, and that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. Okay, so that's when the race was already on. And as I said, this is incredibly dynamic, and more and more people, more and more companies are into this today, because as I said, we all believe in the field that aging is a degenerative process that in the end happens a lot of aging related diseases. No? And this is crucial because we don't want to we don't want to live for very long being sick. We want to live very long being healthy. That's called health span.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's super interesting because actually I was researching about the Back Institute as well. I found about the Back Institute, a few weeks ago when we were making, findings to see uh, how was which organizations are devoting themselves to the study of aging and how to improve the lifespan, how to age better. So yeah, it's I'm very curious about that institute. So thank you for sharing that story with us. And you mentioned um, the cancer. I've seen an interview actually from Maria Blasco,
Mhm.
and it's very interesting, of course, for you, very obvious how cancer is related to aging, and the treatments that some companies are trying to research on are in how to try to stop the telomeres in the cancer, and how to. And it's funny, my point, sorry, just to make it short, is that telomeres is present on cancer, and that's why it's immortal, so to speak, or immortal. And at the same time, we would like to have more telomeres for ourselves, for healthy cells. I don't know if that would be a correct comparison.
I agree. Telomerase, we can call it the mortality enzyme because when you take telomerase and introduce it into a normal, healthy cell of some kinds, not only just one kind of cell, but several kinds of cells, those cells divide endlessly. So they don't stop dividing. Okay. So just by altering this one enzyme, um, you can reach many more cell divisions in vitro. No? In fact, there's actually people today, highly innovative people that are doing some therapies to increase their telomerase levels in themselves. Okay, um, so and let me go back to the distinction between telomerase and cancer because I think this is important. Okay, so telomerase by itself does not cause cancer. Well, let's
Of
make
course,
this clear. Okay, what it allows is the cells to divide many more times. What causes cancer is basically the accumulation of damage in your genes by several mutations that need to happen. Okay, and then those cells that are already carcinogenic, okay, then they can grow when they activate telomerase or another mechanism called the alternative telomere lengthening mechanism or ALT that uses different sort of enzymes to elongate the telomeres. So, it's the mutations, in the genome that occur through DNA damage, and this happens because of metabolism, because you're alive, okay, because of oxidative stress, because of radiation, because of tobacco, because errors in the way the DNA is being copied, etc. No? But you need several things to form several mutations, several genetic changes before a cancer can be called a cancer.
I think if you allow me, Pablo, I think it's relevant for those of our listeners that are not familiar with the structure of chromosomes and what telomerase is and telomeres are. I'm gonna venture a very short explanation, and then Enrique, if you're so kind, you tell me that flies or that doesn't fly. Okay.
Perfect.
So we have the chromosomes. There are many genes, and at the end of the chromosomes, there are two sequences where we repeat the same sequence of letters A, C, G, T, 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 and it's different for every for around the animal kingdom, but it's always there, right? And this telomere that is at the each end of the chromosome is actually a protection or something similar. As the chromosomes multiply, those telomeres start being shorter and shorter, and at the end, it's not enough for chromosomes to duplicate correctly and hence continue with cell multiplication.
And what happens is, during embryonic development, so when we are an embryo, the telomerase is very high because those cells need to divide many, many times. Okay. But when you're born, short short after you're born, that telomerase is being repressed. Okay. And it's only active in the gonads. Okay. And in some stem cells that are there, to like basically, well, the gonads, if we didn't have gonads, we wouldn't exist. Okay. If the gonads didn't have high telomerase activity, we will all be extinct. Um, Millions and millions of years ago. Okay, so this is the way that we pass the genome from ourselves to the later generation, because that genome can be maintained. Okay, when telomeres become short because there's not enough telomerase or alt, what happens is that the cells um, sense this as a DNA damage signal, like a broken chromosome. Okay, the telomere is like this, the end of your shoelace. Okay, and if that telomere is very short or dysfunctional, and it doesn't work, then the chromosomes become sticky. Okay, and then the cells cannot divide, or if they divide with broken telomeres, or very short telomeres, what happens is that they become genetically unstable. The chromosomes start shuffling. Okay, and that's a way to actually create more chances for cancer to develop. So that flies, Pablo.
But I know I would like to ask you, because I saw an interview of you, that about the genetics, and you mentioned in that interview the movie Gattaca, which I love.
Okay.
uh, and you say, okay, this is now the press, like now we can test, like the embryos, we can tell the babies before they are born. And my question is, what's the state of the question now with telomeres? Like, because in the past, okay, now we can tell the probabilistic, the chances of certain diseases. um, can we now modify genetically, or what's the state of the question now, so to say?
Okay. First, let me say that we have to take very much into consideration the ethics. No? Not because technology allows us to do something means that we can do it. Okay. This is critical. This is critical because it has multiple implications. As you know, for example, a few years ago in China, there was a scientist who modified two girls in embryonic stages, so they could not be infected with the virus that causes AIDS, the HIV virus. And he didn't have the permissions to do this, and he got into a lot of trouble. I think actually he ended up in jail. Okay, for some time, because technology is there, but the use of technology, if you're going to modify the human race, okay, this has to be, well, this is first of all not allowed. This is illegal for now. Okay, and um, we have to be very, very careful with what we do with the technology that we have. Technology is very, very powerful. Okay, let me give you just another example, which is a little bit silly, if you may. Um, you have nuclear energy. Okay, and this is very useful, but that doesn't mean that you can create nuclear explosions whenever you like. Um, so these things have to be regulated. Okay,
Mhm.
and that movie Gattaca, which I believe it was also in 1996 or 1997 when the movie came out.
Yeah, around that time.
For the audience that doesn't know the movie, I highly recommend it. It's with Uma Thurman,
Mhm.
and the movie is about the future of humanity, not too far away in the future, maybe in a couple of decades. This was in 1997, projecting what the future was going to be. It's a science fiction movie. Yeah. And in the science fiction movie, there were two kinds of people in society: the people that were naturally conceived after sex, okay? And then the people that were genetically engineered uh, by advanced reproductive technologies and selected those embryos and got rid of diseases, and basically it was a genome of the baby a la carte. Okay, those babies that were born without any genetic predispositions were in an A-class society that opted for the highest paying jobs, and the people that were not conceived that way, they were conceived naturally, ended up in low paying jobs. No? So we have to be very careful with the genetic modification, and only in specific cases, in specific diseases. But the debate is happening. Another day, a person, I cannot name, he said, well, in the metro of New York, there's ads about being able to select certain characteristics of the babies before you have them. No? This is this topic, okay? The technology is there, but the ethics have to be there too.
We know that always technologies advance very. Sometimes law lags behind the advance of technology, so that's a risk that's gonna be there. Because 50 years ago or 70 years ago, we didn't know about the genome or about genetic therapy, and nowadays we are so advanced that yeah, it's
May I ask then? So I understand from what you're saying that we are clearly in a state where diagnosis and selection of embryos is quite straightforward. It's like we that's quite frequent to prevent serious transfer genetic conditions like Down syndrome that has been done for a while. And I suppose now is much more widely spread that there are, because we know many more genetic conditions that are gonna affect the life of the individual. And you have also mentioned that there is the ability of making changes like these Chinese experiments that you were talking about with these twins. Now, how far do you think we are on the ability of Gattaca? The possibility, how far are we from the technical possibility of Gattaca?
Okay, so in Gattaca, there's a scene in the movie when the baby's born and they take one drop of the baby's blood and they run it through a genetic sequencer. Okay, and then they tell the parents the life expectancy, okay, and the probable cause of death by genetic sequencing. Okay, we're pretty close to that. So genetic sequencing has advanced a tremendous amount. Let me just give you another set of numbers. When the human genome was sequenced, and it was sequenced by two different groups of people, the public initiative, led by the National Institutes of Health and in collaboration with many other countries that sequence, a bit of one chromosome, and all that data was compiled. So the public initiative of the human genome, it actually costed $3 billion to do that over about 15 years. But there was a company headed by Craig Venter, Celera Genomics, who did it privately. Okay, and it was able to sequence the human genome by around 300 million, so 10 times less. Okay, it also took 10 years, but it was much more efficient. No? So, for the sake of argument, let's say that in the in the in the late 90s, early 2000s, the sequencing of a whole genome was $1 billion. Today, with the technology that we have today, well, $1 billion and about 10 to 15 years of time, with the technology that we have today, we can sequence the same amount of DNA in a few hours and by a few $100s, couple $100. Okay, so this is an immense change, no? And this is going to keep accelerating.
That's absolutely crazy.
But that's still reading the genome. My question was, how close are we to selecting the genes, modifying the chromosomes to have children a la carte? So how far are we from that? That was my question.
I hope we're very far because of the ethical implications and committees.
Yes.
Okay, technically it can be done. So there's a technology called CRISPR, you may have heard of.
Mhm.
So these are molecular scissors that you can guide this to a particular point in your genome and then surgically modify that part of that gene that you have selected. Okay, so this in research is done by hundreds of research institutes all the time, every day. You know, uh, it's absolutely fine to do it for research, but of course you have to be very, very careful what you're going to do with this technology. If you're going to use it for changing somebody's DNA, and that DNA can be later on passed to another generation, so you have to be, you know, that cannot be done. This is to my knowledge, this is forbidden. What what happens, and it's been, it can be done, is there's something called pre-implantation genetics. Okay, so you take a sperm and an egg and you put them together in vitro. Okay, and then you form an early embryo. This is the basis of IVF, in vitro fertilization procedures, or advanced reproductive technology. Okay, so there's many people in the world today that are born after these procedures. Uh, Today, roughly in advanced countries, about 5 to 10% of the pregnancies come through IVF, in vitro fertilization techniques. And in some cases, those embryos are analyzed and they find a very bad mutation, okay, something which is life threatening. Okay, in that case, it is allowed to not implant that embryo. This is very different from a la carte, which I think, it's something, um, it's maybe not yet possible, but it depends how you use the technology. But ethically, it's extremely questionable.
I suppose, and just from my limited knowledge of the subject, that if you identify a mutation that is related, for instance, to heart failure, and you say, okay, we're gonna replace this gene by a different one that is not so prone to heart failure, at the end, you don't know the other ramifications of the effect of this change, right? Because there's so many proteins and so many elements that are going to be at play, that I suppose one of the essential problems of the ethical objections of doing this is that we may be creating humans which are really in pain or really suffering, when actually we wanted them to be happier and healthier, right? Because we cannot really model the consequences of our changes. Would you say that's a valid statement?
Yeah, that's a perfectly valid statement. There's many things in biology and medicine which we still don't fully understand. Okay, we have around 22,000 genes. Um, some of those genes are very, very complicated. They can have different forms from the same gene, depending on how that gene is read, basically. Um, so we have to be very, very careful, and I think that science and ethics have to be hand in hand. Okay, so just to maybe to summarize this part, um, I think we shouldn't, or we must not modify the human genome at our will. This is again personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else or any organization. This is a molecular biologist speaking as a person, no? Um, because then that can get out of control. Okay, and there's a debate of going forward in the future of what's going to be the life of a human, no? How we're going to mix with technology, how we're going to get implanted with devices. Um, this whole field is called transhumanism, and it may happen in the future, no? But the thing with genes is that once you create something which is transgenic, okay, as a gene from somewhere else, okay, that can copy itself and can have babies, which will also be in that sense transgenic. Okay, and that is something very very um, difficult, and it's not for biologists only to say. It's for many other people, philosophers, um, ethical committees to deal with this in the future.
Many implications. There's a million questions I would like to ask you, but before we get more into this, I would like to ask you specifically. We have been talking a little bit about yeah, how the private sector has collaborated with the public sector to sequence the genome. In this sense, I think that I would like you to explain a little bit what are you doing at life length,
Okay.
what's its purpose, what are you guys doing, and
So, my vision, along with many other people's, is that in order for healthcare to advance and to be well taken care of, there has to be collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. Okay. Uh, Neither is entirely capable of doing what needs to be done. Okay. So, a collaboration needs to happen between the public and the private. Now, in the field of longevity and health span, there is from maybe 15 or around 15 years ago, Google was the first company to invest their own resources in creating a subsidiary of Google. In that case, it is called Calico, California Life Company, no, to study aging and to see, what interventions may work to basically delay aging and the aging-related diseases. No? And then a few years ago, very wealthy people from Silicon Valley, from tech companies, created another uh, company
Altos
called
Lab, no?
Altos Labs. No? With an initial investment, I believe, of $3 billion.
Correct.
Okay, um, that company actually is hiring the top-notch scientists from around the world.
Some of them are Spanish.
Yes, actually, I believe several of them are Spanish. So
Yes,
we have really good talent in Spain.
absolutely.
And people that recognize this talent, have have hired these amazing scientists. No? One of them, not from Spain, is Shinji Yamanaka, who got the Nobel Prize about 10 years ago for the discovery of something which is called induced pluripotent stem cells. Uh, for the people that are not biologists, what this means is that you can take an old cell, okay, and you can inject four proteins, which are called transcription factors, in that one cell, and a few days later, that old cell becomes a totally young cell. It has the capacity to create any tissue. Okay. if you actually do this in mouse cells, you can take those modified iPS cells on the mouse and you can recreate an entire mouse. Okay, so the
So if you take
Yamanaka
an
lab.
old
Sorry,
if, what can you repeat that example? You take an old mouse.
you can take a cell from an old mouse and convert it into a stem cell that is as capable as an embryonic stem cell. And you
Okay.
can take that embryonic stem cell and create a new mouse from it, an
Okay.
entire new mouse from an old cell. So
Or I suppose, Enrique, that you could regenerate any organ of an old mouse.
exactly, exactly. So there's a number of companies, primarily in the United States, related to the field of technology, related to the field of artificial intelligence, which is another twist, that are investing quite heavy resources into the aging research field, and this is
Um,
motivating,
Absolutely.
acceleration of knowledge. The I think the reason for this is if you can partially take old cells and convert them into young cells, you can delay the aging processes of several organs or a particular organ. Okay, or you can create maybe an organ replacement in the future. Huh?
Which is, interestingly enough, what Constantina, one of the top scientists in FOREVERNESS, does. She has this rejection for mechanical implants for reasons that would spoil the story. And then she decides to regenerate all of her implants with her own genetic material. And I find it interesting because this is 2005 when the prediction, the writing of this novel. It's
and
interesting.
and and going back to Pablo's question about, what do we do at LifeLink? How is this connected? Okay, so for cells to divide many times, you have to have either very long telomeres because they get short with every cell division, or with aging per se, or you can reactivate telomerase to maintain those telomeres. So uh, one of the first things that happens during the induced pluripotent stem cell generation with these Yamanaka factors or partially Yamanaka factors is that cells are reprogrammed and the telomeres grow a lot. Okay, they activate telomerase, so they get ready to have many divisions to form um, an organ or to form um, an organism. And by the way, telomeres, they're so important, they're so critical that they are conserved throughout evolution. Okay. And so evolution is a selective process, no? And when things work, they're maintained. Okay. So our exact telomeric sequence, TTAGGG, at the end of our chromosomes, is perfectly conserved in all, not only in all mammalians, in all mammals, in all vertebrates. Okay. But it happens that yeast cells, the ones that make your beer and your bread, also have telomeres. Okay. And Drosophila have telomeres and C. elegans have telomeres. No? So any cell that needs to divide that has linear chromosomes have to have a telomere maintenance mechanism. And this is what we study at LifeLink. Okay. We studied it we study and we measure this in humans, also in animals, but mostly in humans. And we are able to determine the telomere length of your cells in a unique way with unique technology that we're able to see and measure single telomeres in single cells. So telomeres are not all the same. Inside a cell, you have a variety of telomeres. Some telomeres are short, some telomeres are much longer. And we're able to quantify each telomere in a cellular population with a sensitivity and reproducibility that we believe it's the best in the world today.
And Enrique, may I ask, so what would be the exact role of telomerase? Is that to lengthen the telomeres, to repair them? What exactly is telomerase
So,
for in this part?
so telomerase does several things. Okay, telomerase is there to make sure that the cells have enough telomere. Okay, that they don't become very old. If you have a mutant cell with mutations in genes that protect it from cancer and you hyperactivate telomerase, then those cells can divide for much longer. Okay. 85% of human tumors activate telomerase, and the other 15 activate the other mechanism called alt. So 100% of tumors activate one or the other or both, because if not, they could not form a tumor. So cancer cells have found the way to become immortal. Okay. And this is through telomere maintenance, through either telomerase or alt. Okay.
Little
So
buggers, huh?
yeah, yeah, and therefore I think there was Pablo that said, okay, there's a few companies in the world that are working to inhibit these mechanisms as a potential therapy for certain kinds of cancers. Okay, and there's a lot of research going on in this because let's say let's make an analogy. It's a very simple analogy that works for a person or for a cancer. Okay, for a person, imagine that we are a car, okay, with parts, and we have a full tank of gas, okay, but nobody is going to put more gas in the tank, okay. So you have your gasoline, and the gasoline is going to be less and less the more you drive the car, okay. This is what happens with aging and telomeres, okay. So far, this we're not activating telomerase for rejuvenation. There are some supplements out there that they're saying that they do. Okay,
Which
and
ones?
they have some effects. I shouldn't be speaking about commercial brands. No, it's really not my role. No, but the supplement world is trying to activate telomerase. It's also trying to activate other molecules which are important for health, okay, and to prevent aging. And in the case of another car, which is the cancer cell, okay, that gasoline tank is being replenished by telomerase all the time, okay. So that car can drive for very, very long, and that's what we call immortality of the cancer. There are some organisms out there that can live extraordinarily long. Okay, there's trees that also have telomeres, and telomeres that can live for thousands of years. Okay, there's some organisms like some flatworms that can rejuvenate, and if you cut that flatworm in two, it'll grow another part of the body, and they can do this many, many, many times. Okay, so not only in cancer, but certain organisms have found a way to live for um, many hundreds of years or thousands of years. The human life expectancy today, with the technology that was available from now till the going back, okay, is 122 years. Um, there was a woman in France that lived 122. And then we have another person in Spain, Maria Brañas, that lived, I believe, until 118. So that seems to be the maximum lifespan for the human. Okay. Uh, with the technology that we have today or that we had 20 years ago. Okay. What the jury is still out. It's what's going to happen now with all the new technologies. No? Um, I can tell you my sense, my feeling after having studied this for a very long time is that um, immortality in the human there has no scientific basis. Okay, but what may happen is that we may live without disease for 150 years. And what it's really not known is, with the implications of what's going on in technology, particularly in AI is being used to discover certain modifications, genetic or drugs, to extend lifespan. Okay. And it will find a way. I'm sure it will find a way to extend human lifespan and health span in the next 10 to 20 years. And that seems to be the consensus. How long? It's hardly possible or impossible to tell.
And do you foresee these to be embryonic state modification that makes future generations live longer, or potentially these changes, these modifications, alterations could be applied to living humans that would see their life expectancy suddenly lengthen?
No, it's the second case. Is we can do things, chemical interventions, to extend the health span of people significantly. So, in some of the meetings that I've attended recently, there's engineers like Ray Kurzweil, who's the director of engineering at Google. For example, has written a couple of very famous books called the
The
Singularity is There,
singularity, we were talking about them in our last episode. Yeah,
you know, or other people like Aubrey de Grey, who is a theoretical biologist in the field of aging, that have postulated the hypothesis that it's going to come a time pretty soon when technology is going to be able to stop aging and then reverse it. Okay. This is called the longevity escape velocity. Is analogous to the escape velocity of a rocket. If that rocket has enough speed, it will escape the orbit of the Earth because the gravity won't be able to pull it down fast enough. Okay, that escape velocity is also implicated in human aging. So theoretically, and the predictions of several people and experts in the field is that moment will happen between 2035 and 2045. In that decade, we will find a way to stop aging and then reverse.
so that means that even people like us who were born in the 60s would potentially not people would be potentially benefit. They would, yeah, we would potentially benefit from these advances, and then in the 2100 find ourselves 30 years old. Is that what we're saying?
Um, that's what some people say. That's what some people say.
Yes, no, of course, but this is the
Um,
implications of what they are saying, right? They would be.
yeah, I don't quite believe it yet, because one of the more sound, more established reasons for for aging is the DNA damage, no? In all of your cells. That DNA
Mm.
damage, it accumulates and it creates mistakes in your genome, and your genes cannot be read, cannot function well, no? And we cannot change those genomes. That DNA damage that has occurred, okay, you can change it in some cells which may be accessible, but there is not yet a way to change the all of the genomes in a human body. That is science fiction, okay, with today's technology.
So,
So
but then the
what's already been damaged, okay, um, it's difficult to change. You can improve it, okay, but to change it completely is mm, nobody can, with today's technology, or maybe in 10 years or in 20 years, I don't know, change your brain.
So the question then that I like asking to people expert like you is, I understand that with today's technology, we don't have a foreseeable solution to these problems that you're stating, but is there a fundamental reason why unlimited longevity could not happen in humans?
Um, it's a it's a terrific, good question,
Thank
um,
you.
and it's very hard. It's very hard to answer that because we cannot comprehend the technology of the future. Okay, um, I see it very difficult that that happens because we are machines. We are exposed to the environment. Okay, we are exposed to our own metabolism. Okay, the fact that we are alive means that from the time you're born, you begin aging. Okay, you don't you don't begin aging when doctors tell you that you begin aging at the age of 35. No, your telomeres start to get shortened, okay, or shortened
before
from
you're
the
born.
time you're born. Actually, before you're born, you are beginning to accumulate damage. Okay, and telomeres shorten. So you may reverse this. You may and telomeres are just one part of the story. There is a very famous paper in Cell, The Hallmarks of Aging, which speaks about 12 fundamental ways that aging happens in the cells. Telomeres are a primary and probably one of the most important ones, but there's many others. There's another 11 to our knowledge today. 10 years ago, there was 9. Now there's 12. Maybe in 10 years, there'll be 15, okay, that we discover new things. But the wear and tear, the damage that us as biological machines have, that's going to continue. And when you take a piece of metal and you expose it to oxygen, it rusts. Um, the same thing happens with our cells. So we can improve the way that our repair mechanisms of our cells um, function. So we can repair the genes that are broken. Okay? And in fact, there's people that don't have those repair genes and they are very sick, or they actually die in utero. So we have these mechanisms. We have this repair machinery in our cells, but the cells are constantly being damaged. Every day, every cell receives tens of thousands of mutations every single day, just because the fact that it is alive. Yeah. So that's going to happen no matter what. It's how we're going to be able to repair it. Um, it's going to mean how we're going to age or how long we're going to live. The question here is repair,
It's the
because the
technology,
damage
it's
is
the
going to
escape
happen.
velocity. If we can come up maybe with, no, maybe with
With nanobots, there's people working on nanobots that supposedly, these are very uh, small machines that can get into your cells and maybe repair. CRISPR can be a nanobot. It can be there, you know, watching your genome, and if something is mutated, it can maybe repair it. Okay, that may happen in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. It's very hard to tell, but the damage, because we are alive, is going to happen all the time. So
So I'm
immortality,
gonna.
oof, it's hard to predict. As a molecular biologist, I don't see it.
I think from what you are saying, my conclusion that would be okay. So no single treatment is conceptually right now in our minds going to be able to make you immortal for ages, immortal, as Pablo
Mhm.
said, forever. However, aging is going to introduce aging related diseases always, which may be replaced using frozen intact stem cells, or reintroducing, like using the IPS methodology. So a long sequence of interventions could take humans a very, very long way into the future. Would that be also something?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And then is in this exponential world of technology that we're living today, um, it's almost impossible for us to predict where that exponential technology is going to take us.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, in the longevity talks that I went in last October in Madrid, the Ray Kurzweil uh, basically said that the AI, it increases its power of analysis and reasoning by 10 times every year. So 6 years from today, AI will be 1 million times more powerful than today. 12 years from now, it'll be 1 billion times more powerful than it is today. And it's, as humans with our limitations, we are not we are not prepared to think, that far out. We're humans are used to are used to thinking linearly. Today, tomorrow, this year, next year. We don't go 1 year, 10 year, 100 years, 1,000 years. We're not built that way by evolution. So it's very hard to predict. Um, Curiously, there's a price, the highest paying price in technology in the world in the history of humanity is called the X price on longevity.
The X price on longevity.
Yeah, it's $100 million. So 10, sorry, so 100 times more than the Nobel Prize
Mhm.
for the team of people that demonstrates that they can retard or delay aging by 10 years in the next 10 years. So imagine this is like firing up gasoline, okay, in the innovation of this space. No, everybody's racing. This is like the race to the moon is the race to longevity, and it happened. It got started 2 years ago, and the people that are paying those $100 million for those teams are people from Saudi Arabia, the evolution um, people, which are they fund public research. Okay, they're promoting this because one thing's clear: if we're able to delay aging, we're gonna delay most, if not all, aging-related diseases. So Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, um, late onset or adult onset cancer, sarcopenia, which is the loss of your muscles, probably diabetes, and other metabolic diseases. Just by pushing back aging, you're going to push back all those diseases at once.
Also, long, how do you say, um, long diseases,
Fibrosis,
fibrosis, yeah, no?
emphysema, all sorts of stuff, bone marrow failure, blindness. There's a team in Boston that using these IPS cells therapies injected into your retina. They're curing blindness in the mouse today.
And this is my question, because many of these experiments can take place in animals, not in humans, but fundamentally we're the same. And we have, if I'm not wrong, we have achieved um, expanding the lifespan or of mice sensibly. And
Yeah, believe it or not, our human genome and the mouse genome has significant differences. Okay, we may be 98% similar, but we're different in many ways. Human disease in some models cannot be recapitulated in the mouse. Okay, um, so we're close, but we're very different in some other aspects. For example, telomeres, which is what I know a little bit more of. The
that's
telomeres,
why when I said that we're fundamentally the same, I was referring more of the, maybe I'm also wrong on this, but I understood that the telomeres is the mechanism is similar, no?
it's similar, but there's big differences at the same time. So the telomeres in laboratory mice are 5 times longer than human.
Mhm.
Okay, and the mouse lives 2.5 years maximum life expectancy if you don't do modifications. If you do modifications, maybe that mouse can live up to 50% longer. I think that has been the record. Okay, so it's other thing other than telomeres that it's limiting the mouse lifespan. Okay, and it's probably because the mice cells have a lot more damage than the human cells. Their DNA repair mechanisms are not as perfect as ours.
So, may I, Pablo, if maybe it's time to start directing all the conversation in other directions, because one of the big topics of foreverness is there's two. One's immortality. So in foreverness, we assume that there is one shot treatment and you're immortal, which we have agreed is probably unlikely to happen, but it doesn't matter how it happens. Some people start being immortal. So there's two topics that are explored in the novel and which I think were worth considering. Is one of them is potential overpopulation, and the other one is potential Gattaca effect, separate one type of humans from the other type of humans.
Hmm.
What are your views first in one, then in the other, or whatever?
We're not prepared for that. Um, the consequences of immortality, immortality, call it whatever you want, living 300 years uh, are far beyond our ability to handle them today. Um, so every year, okay, for the last 100 years or so, every year we live 3 months more, okay, because
You
100
mean
years
as a species
as a
around the
species
globe?
around the globe,
Around the globe.
around the
Okay.
globe, okay.
Okay.
And if you bring this down to Earth, this is creating a lot of changes in society. Very deep changes. For example, the healthcare costs. The healthcare inflation is several times higher than the economic inflation. So the medical costs are growing faster than our GDP, gross domestic product, meaning that the percentage of GDP that has to be used for healthcare, it's bigger and bigger. Okay, and economy has its limits. Pension plans, you know, pension plans in many countries in Europe, which is a very sort of protective environment, started maybe 30 or 40 or 50 years ago when life expectancy was 75. Now it's 85. You know, so the system has to sustain that age population for 10 years longer. Okay. And what's happening is that obviously governments are reacting and they're pushing the retirement age longer and longer. Okay. So a few years ago, you could retire at 65. Now you have to retire at 67. Pretty soon it'll be 70. Okay. So we're going to be adapting our work. We're going to be adapting our lives to be able to work longer as we live longer. But this has humongous, huge implications for the healthcare system, the social system, the economic system, the who's taking care of these people. uh, the population pyramids in Europe are inverted, meaning that there's
Mm,
much more people that are old than at the base. We have very few babies. And this is going to become a humongous problem. Who's going to
absolutely.
take care? Who's going to take care of us? Is it going to be Optimus 3, the robot from Elon Musk? You know, what's going to happen? So just by normal state of affairs, not introducing any sort of futuristic gene therapy or treatment, just by the way that technology is evolving and we're living longer, this is already creating some very important challenges. No? Imagine if we go from living, Spain is the second longest lived country in the world after Japan. Our life expectancy for women is 85, 86. Today, for men, it's about 4 or 5 years less. This, by the way, is also evolutionarily conserved. Females in multiple organisms live longer than males. Okay, that probably has to do with the fact that they have different hormones. Um, so imagine that instead of average life expectancy of 85 for women, there's innovation, and they go from 85 to 105. It's not that far out. What are gonna people do? Who's gonna take who's gonna take care of those people? For how long do they have to work? Oh my goodness, no? There's a lot of questions out there. Just for 20 years life expectancy increase.
Retirement
So
at 90.
um, let's just think for a second that innovation takes us to live 300 years. No, population. What are you gonna do with resources? You um,
Because you
technology.
assume if you go 300 years, then the population would increase.
Yeah, if you don't die and if you keep having babies, the population is going
Yeah,
to
if
increase.
that's a question. If you keep having babies, some many people. So when we bring up this topic, many people say, yeah, but people don't necessarily will have babies.
True, true. But there's a fundamental, there's
Drive,
a
yeah,
For
drive
giving
to,
out.
to pass your genes to another generation for
yeah.
today, the majority of people. Okay. Um, Children will be like in Gattaca, maybe they will be conceived in a different way. Maybe they will be selected in a different way in the future. Most babies will be um, selected. Who knows? No, because disease is a burden. Disease is a problem. Um, but yeah, so I don't know if there's resources in this planet, okay, to do that. No, that's a very big question. No, we are exhausting our resources faster every year, and this is a fact. No, pretty soon will be 10 billion people in the world. If those people don't die, what's going to happen. And then the second question you raised, which is also very interesting and very provocative, is the access to technology. You know, rich people get it first. Okay, this is the norm. This is what we have observed throughout many years. No, and then technology becomes cheaper, and then it becomes more affordable, and then it gets democratized into lower, not lower, let's say less rich people. Okay, and eventually it will get accessible to the majority of people.
All
or
right.
not.
Or not. Or not.
Well,
Unless this is the premise of the novel, that to avoid problem number one, problem number two is created by not letting mortals get access to immortality treatment. So
mhm.
it does no longer become a question of cost, but of question of acquired rights. And this is the in the first volume of the novel. This is the topic. Who has access? So we discovered this technology. Who has access to it? Because in order to avoid problem one, they say, yeah, you don't have access, and
It may
that's
happen.
also a
It may
hypothesis.
happen, but
Yeah,
listen, this is a very much an ethical question.
yeah,
Okay, who has
yeah.
access to technology, and why they do and why others don't? This is not a biological question. This is an ethical, economic, social, has all these sorts of ramifications. No.
I
Um,
think you will enjoy reading the novel because
yeah, yeah, I'm
all these
sure.
all these questions pique your curiosity, and so
No, no, it's fascinating. What I can tell you is that the world of geoscience and longevity research is exploding. It's going to continue to advance at a faster and faster pace with the use of artificial intelligence. Um,
How are
all
you?
scientists, all scientists are using artificial intelligence today, because big data. We are a bag of data. Okay, our cells have 3 billion letters of DNA, each one of our cells. Okay, um, and this is data. Okay, instead of having ones and zeros, we have four variants: A, C, G, T. Okay, so each one of our cells, it contains a massive amount of data. Imagine we are an organism that has 37 trillion cells. Each one of those cells carries something like 10 gigabytes of information. So yes, you do the numbers. We are a bag of information, which is amazing. But we're built to create. In my view, we're built to pass on, on knowledge and information to later generations, whether being biologically or not. um, but the planet has a limit. No, every ecosystem has a limit. No, if you take a big bottle of bacterial culture, you know liquid the bacteria live in, and you put bacteria, little bacteria in there, the bacteria start multiplying, 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 and then they reach to a maximum, and then they start dying, and everybody dies. Okay, because of the exhaustion of resources, of food, of water, of oxygen.
That's actually the beginning of the novel.
exactly.
Okay.
But we are using bunnies instead of cells.
In this
Okay.
bacteria, the
Bacteria.
Banachirium. Anyway, I think it's been fantastic talking to you, Enrique. Thank you for your technical knowledge, for your personal views on the ethical and moral issues. And Pablo, I suppose we have to
Ye-
ask the last question, right?
Yeah, we have to ask the last question. But before asking that, I'd say I would have asked you a million more questions. I have, both Pedro, Juan, and me were trying to ask a lot of questions, but so many different topics that the question maybe was not relevant at that point. So I have a lot of more questions in the back. Maybe we have. If you enjoy it, hopefully in the future, maybe we can do another round.
Of course, you can count on it. It's been a pleasure. Let's see what the audience thinks, whether this aging topic, and immortality is of interest. And then, um, we can repeat. We can.
Absolutely.
I love. It's obvious. You said, I'm very passionate. In your introduction, I'm very passionate about what we do. I'm passionate about what we do at the company. I'm passionate about what science and technology can do. So you can have me a couple more times if the audience likes it.
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. The last question is if there
Thank you.
was actually a treatment for, in immortality or yeah, unlimited longevity, would you take it or not, and why?
I would take it for some time, okay, until maybe I decide that I had enough. Okay? I would, I had a child when I was already older, so an older parent. I would love to meet my child's, uh, granddaughter. Um, so maybe live 150 or 200 years without disease. Okay. Beyond that, I don't know what I would do. But if I can live 150 years old without disease or 200 years old, I would definitely do it.
We'll have another interview in year 2120, and then we check on you how you're doing, Enrique. We're gonna check on you how you're doing now.
Let's drink to that.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye bye.